now it is time for our interview with Julie Walsh Smith, the CEO of Complexly, an educational media company founded by Hank and John Green, also known as the Vlog Brothers. The OG YouTubers recently sold their shares in the company and turned it into a nonprofit. Here's a little of what Hank said when he announced the sale on YouTube.
As of January 1st, 2026, this is real, it's happened, it's done. Complexly has entered its next phase, relaunching as a nonprofit organization.
Over the years, a lot of people have knocked on our door asking if they could maybe buy Complexly, and their prices were compelling. But the ideas interest us, not the payoff. But look, we did listen, and not just because the payoff might have been enticing, though that is part of it, but also because we wanted to make sure that we were doing the best thing for the mission of the organization. And maybe like a big influx of capital and a lot of energy going toward selling to schools, etc. Maybe that would have been the thing that would have the biggest impact. But in all the conversations between John and Julie, who's the CEO of Complexly, other people at Complexly, it just seemed like if we wanted to ensure that people today and forever will have access to this content, that a different path was the right path.
Hi, Julie. Welcome to Scalable.
Hello. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's so nice to have you here. And I don't know, Kaya, if I've actually told you this story, but Julie and I first met in Montana last summer. We had dinner in Missoula. Am I saying that correctly? It is Missoula, which is actually where Complexly is headquartered, which was a surprise to me when I found out, because you don't expect to have a creator media company headquartered in Montana.
No, we may be one of only, a couple. Hank was based here when he started Vlog Brothers, and that's why we are a little crew based out of Montana. I mean, we're mostly remote now that we have ever since the pandemic, but there's still about 20 of us here in Missoula, and we come into the office. We have our studios in the basement. Yeah, it's a good spot. But Jasmine, it was so good to meet you last summer.
And then we ran into each other in Dubai as well. And now you're here on Scalable. So I feel like it's just been like a world tour of us bumping into each other. So it's really fun.
So I actually knew that you were based in Montana because Hank and I, a few years ago at my summit for the information, talked about the Montana TikTok ban, which at the time was a headline. So I think the biggest creator in Montana. So we were talking a little bit about that. But Hank and John Green are the founders of Complexly. They are longtime YouTubers. I've gotten to know Hank a little bit over the years, and I find him incredibly thoughtful and also just so funny. But I'm curious, before we kind of get into things, like, what is it like to work with him and John? Like, give us a little bit of kind of insight into the culture of Complexly. You've been there for so long.
Yeah, I've been here for 12 years now, and I started as Hank's assistant, actually. So I was reading every email he sent and received. I was helping with his taxes. It was very much like I got really into his world really quickly. And honestly, over the years, I've just gotten to see Hank and John behind the scenes. What I usually say, because it's true, is that people, they think of Hank and John as like do-gooders and really thoughtful humans. And behind the scenes, they are even more thoughtful and generous. And they really make decisions that they think are for the best of, their audience and their staff.
Hank and John have had, a front row seat to the rise of the creator economy. They've had to really navigate, the rise of short form and changing platforms and all of that. So what has all that change sort of meant for you as a business, and how do you keep up with all of it?
Yeah, it's hard. We've been a real business for almost 15 years now with staff and processes and email addresses. And so I think we have for a while now not been able to be as fast and adaptive as individual creators have. And so Hank and John have often been our pioneers doing all the testing for us and figuring out the rise and fall of different trends and different platforms and formats, making it so that we haven't had to invest our resources into doing that, and really only plug in where we see opportunity after they've tested it out, or even after other creators have tested it out. So it's been nice that we haven't had to be the guinea pigs. And, for better or for worse, it means we are not usually the first one on the scene for any new trend or format.
So speaking of change, earlier this year, Hank and John sold their shares in Complexly and they turned the company into a nonprofit. Tell us a little bit more about that decision, what it means for you as a business and how we got here.
It has been probably 1 to 2 years of earnest exploration into the long-term kind of structure and home for Complexly. We have, over the course of the past decade and a half, been working toward that key man issue. Hank and John establishing CrashCourse and SciShow back in 2012, but over the years we have pulled them off of every single, hosting duty. So we brought in other hosts. They're not writing every script. We have a staff of 85 full-time employees now. So we have been working toward that, standard creator conundrum for a while now. And so it was really just a matter of, well, where is this entity and this IP really going to end up? And it started, we started having serious discussions a couple of years ago when there's more acquisition and investment going on in the creator space. We had obviously some interest come to us for acquiring or investing in Complexly. And we took those conversations out of curiosity to see, is this a way for Complexly to have the most possible impact over the course of the next several decades? And we even explored other options like employee ownership. Nonprofit was always a potential route, obviously because Hank and John founded Complexly wanting to create engaging educational content that we make for free for everyone, forever, everywhere. And that is not the most appealing target for, commercial investment. After really turning over every stone, we kept coming back to nonprofit. And the reason I think we didn't get there faster is because it's a one-way door. Once you donate the company to the public, which is what Hank and John essentially did, you can't undo that really. And so we really needed to make sure it was the right call. So finally, in the middle of last year, we really, Hank and John had come to a point where they were ready to make the final call. And then it was off to the races with lawyers and CPAs for another 6 months. And we were really excited to make it official at the beginning of this year. It took a lot of thoughtfulness. Kaya, you just said Hank is very thoughtful. And yes, we did not make this decision lightly. And it's really generous of Hank and John, I think, to make sure that Complexly is being placed in the hands of the public and protecting our content and our educational mission from kind of the ups and downs of the market or, potentially becoming, History Channel was once the History Channel and now it's Ancient Aliens. Like we're trying to avoid that future for our brands. And so we do feel like that the public ownership model is ultimately the right place for Complexity to live.
So you talked a little bit there about de-risking in terms of, key man or key person risk, which is a big theme in the industry these days. Also talked a little bit about, wanting to have impact and your mission. So how do you think about Complexly? What is the impact that you're trying to have and what is it ultimately that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I really love this question. We've been talking about it a lot lately, and we've made the internal kind of statement around what our purpose is. And our purpose is to inspire curiosity. We inspire curiosity because curiosity builds understanding, and understanding builds a better world. And so we have a lot of really passionate people here, and we have to kind of realize that the way that we're impacting the world for the better is by giving people the light bulb moment they didn't know to expect, or helping them pass a test, or helping them become an engineer, or having them watch a fun interview with Hank and Rachel Bilson and learning something that you weren't really expecting to learn. So really, it's about curiosity, and it's not necessarily just curiosity for the sake of a classroom use, but really just to inspire an entire generation of lifelong learners.
I'd love to dive in a little more on kind of the key person risk, because it is a bit of a conundrum, right? So many people are attracted to creators because it's a person, right? And then creators often try to kind of branch out. We just saw, Alex Earl launch a skincare line, and you've seen so many different kind of consumer products or shows or all these different things. And obviously you can't replace, John and Hank as hosts overnight, right? It's a process. But how do you balance those two things? Because obviously they've been at the heart of this content for so long, but it's also not sustainable, right? For them to be writing every script and doing everything. I mean, Jasmine and I are in that phase now where we are writing every script and doing everything. So 85-person team sounds amazing, but how do you think about that? Because the creator economy is about people, but it's a challenge, right? When you're running a business that's so tied to a creator that you want to broaden out, but then you don't want to lose the audience at the same time.
Yeah, it is challenging. And I think that is something we faced as we looked into traditional exit models where Hank and John needed to be involved for X amount of years. And, but then what happens after that? And I just feel like the way we've always thought about it is it's a long game. It's a slow drip. It's brand building beyond the personality. We have for so long the umbrella brand of Complexly was Hank and John. It wasn't Complexly. We actually didn't even have a brand until 2016. We launched Complexly as our umbrella brand, and a lot of people still don't even have never heard of Complexly, but they watch CrashCourse and SciShow and Eons and Bizarre Beasts and Study Hall. So we are really trying to kind of replace Hank and John as our umbrella brand with Complexly. We want to be seen as synonymous with trustworthy. We want when people are out there looking at everything on YouTube or other platforms and they're not quite sure what information is going to be good and trustworthy and fact checked. If they see our name pop up, they're gonna know to go to us for that trusted information. Hank and John in that process are just transitioning from being leaders of the company to cheerleaders. So we're never going to be completely separate, but they can then continue their separate careers as creators. I think that the way that Hank and John have been successful in overcoming their key man risk, at least as successful as one can be, because it is still tricky, is they've just had 15 to 20-year runway. And they've been thinking about it the whole time.
Let's talk a little bit more about, sitting at the intersection of creator media and educational media, because there has to be a balance, right, between being entertaining and also them being educational. Like, I think back to my days at school, I loved going to school and I would probably go back if I had the time, but adding that to our crazy schedules right now seems completely impossible.
Please don't.
But anyway, even when I was at school, though, like I found, the textbooks to be pretty dense. They were hard to get through, even if I loved the subject material. And obviously, this was a very, very different time without aging myself. But we didn't have YouTube to turn to. We didn't have, a lot of resources outside of what we were provided at school. But now that we do, and you are an educational channel producing educational content on YouTube, how do you sort of balance all of that, being entertaining, being educational, especially as you're competing with so many other creators and channels and things that are kind of sucking up our time?
It's not easy, and any educational creator, we have many friends in this space, they would tell you the same. It is kind of a constant battle. We have editorial standards that we will not compromise on. And so that is the reality in which we make creative decisions, and it can feel limiting sometimes. But we cannot, again, with this long game, become the most trusted educational media brand without really sticking to our standards. And then beyond that, we do have to chase views and chase reach. And the algorithm isn't something that can be totally disregarded, because to a certain extent, it mirrors consumer behavior, and we want to find those audiences. And so just because we're not, fully reliant on advertiser income, and we never have been, and I actually don't think a lot of creators are. I think they make their money in a lot of different ways, as do we. We can never just, be making content that we think is good for the world and uploading it and calling it a day. If it's not reaching people, then we don't have impact. So audiences will always be important.
You're also in a moment where you're competing for views with other creators, but also you're now competing with AI. It's changing how we're searching for things, how we're shopping, how we're learning things. How does that, impact your strategy and your business as people are increasingly going to AI and also generating content with AI?
I try not to make too definitive statements about AI because it changes all the time, and, things won't age well, opinions won't age well. But where I can say we've stood for the last few years now is we came out with an AI policy for our creative processes back in 2022. It just puts parameters on the fact that we don't create scripts with generative AI. We don't create animations and illustrations or use images that were created with generative AI. And that was kind of a scary moment because you never know, well, if everyone else does it, are we just going to be the Luddites who are not competing at all anymore? We actually posted that AI policy on our LinkedIn and got a ton of like positive feedback, and people really saw it as like a leadership step in the space to really make that stance. And that's where we are still. You know, we think that people want to watch content that was made by humans, and I think we've been right so far on that. I think a lot of creators are just kind of not feeling that threatened by AI when it comes to, you know, creative competition. But, you know, we'll always kind of be, you know, try to be aware of any threats there.
Do you think that slows you down at all, though? I mean, if you think about just how quickly things are moving and how quickly creators have to get content out there, you already said that sometimes you're not the fastest moving creator company. I mean, if you're not using AI to help with your scripts or to produce content and others are, do you worry at all that you might fall behind?
Yes, I do worry about that. I think that's the trade-off, right? So we're making a bet that people are going to want to see content that was made with, you know, humans driving the creative process. I don't have any issue really with a back end, you know, administrative processes or kind of busy work being done with the help of AI. I think that's really important, and we're not going to put as strong of parameters around that.
So I wanted to dig in a little bit deeper into production. How long does it take for you to make an episode from start to finish? What does an episode cost, especially since, you know, you're not using any AI in scripting or in the content generation and so forth?
Yeah, that varies based on which channel you're talking about. CrashCourse is going to cost $5,000 a minute. SciShow is going to cost $500 a minute. And that is different because of the amount of resources we're pulling in and the timelines, the production timelines of each of those shows. So CrashCourse is often 6 months to even 18 months of development before the series is launched and even wrapped. And that is just because we are pulling in, you know, people with PhDs to write the curriculum. Often we have a funding partner who is also providing us some, you know, connections to other subject matter experts as well. And there's a relationship there that's managed. And then SciShow is more, you know, we're doing 4 to 5 episodes a week, and it's just more in-house and a faster turnaround. So a SciShow episode can be, you know, 6 to 8 weeks from pitch to the episode topic. We assign it to a writer, whether we have an in-house writer or freelance writer, and then it comes in and kind of that production pipeline is just faster moving than say CrashCourse.
What are kind of the primary revenue streams, especially for kind of the creators and educators that you're featuring in the shows? You know, how does the monetization look like for that? And do they have any ownership in the brand as well?
All of our talent is freelance now. We used to do co-production shows. This is years and years ago, where there was some sort of shared ownership, but we felt like those didn't always have like longevity that we needed for the brand, and kind of got, I guess, sticky, I guess, if one partner wants to move in one direction and the other one wants, you know, that's hard to navigate if there's a shared ownership. So we actually try to avoid that now and just bring in great talent on and paying them, you know, like a day rate for appearing. And that has worked well for us. We also, you know, all of our writers are freelance or they're in-house. So oftentimes in the creator world, the writer and the on-camera host is the same person. And I think it can be challenging for us because that's not the case. Usually it's not the case. Because we have experts writing the scripts, and then we have somebody with either charisma or authority or a mix of both being the one to deliver it on camera. Everyone always asks about advertising because I think when you hear media, you hear, okay, that's advertising business. What do you guys make? But I always have to correct whoever's asking that. Advertising is about 20% of our revenue. And that includes even the you know, shout out sponsorship, bumper sponsorships and AdSense, of course. And then another 40% of it is audience support, whether that's Patreon or we run a couple fundraising campaigns every year One of them just wrapped, actually. It's our SciShow campaign where we did kind of this, it's kind of like your PBS sponsorship or fundraising drive for like 2 weeks. We'll be asking people to donate and they get this little perk. And then we have one of those for the Crash Course coin as well that does really well. So that's audience support. And then the other 40% is funders and philanthropists who are really, writing significant checks to us to produce a series or content that is mission aligned with them. Becoming a nonprofit just lets us lean into those revenue streams. We are not abandoning advertising, but that's not going to be our priority moving forward. And we're really just, I guess I just mentioned audience support. That revenue stream grew 56% last year, and we weren't even a nonprofit last year. And so now we've again kind of unlocked more opportunity here. People know that when they give to our shows that it's not going into Hank and John's pockets, because they'll say it themselves, they don't need it. I think we're just excited to see what happens with the revenue mix as a nonprofit, but we don't expect that 20% of advertisement to grow.
Do you think that's a replicable business model for other creators, especially ones that, aren't in, say, educational content or aren't a nonprofit? Because that kind of seems like the ultimate goal that a lot of creators are striving for right now, to lessen their reliance on advertising and really be able to go direct to fans to make money.
Yeah. I don't know that it's going to be the right move for everybody. I think it's totally fine if you want to exit your company and become financially independent. For Hank and John, they have already done that multiple times. So this was not that opportunity for them. And so they were comfortable donating their shares of the company. So if a creator is going to need some sort of exit for themselves, there are different ways to think about it. You could do employee ownership. Of course, you can take investment. You can do like a perpetual purpose trust where your vision for the company is intact forever. But then as far as different revenue streams and lessening reliance on advertiser revenue, they should just be out there meeting their fans. They should be doing live events and inviting them to like wear this cool t-shirt and really just building the community around them. Those are the biggest opportunities for reducing your reliance on advertisers.
So we are also in this moment now where facts are constantly being debated. You also have creators behaving like trained journalists, spreading information, some of it good, some of it bad. And then, of course, AI, which, is making it harder to tell what is real and what's not online. Tell us a little bit more about how you as an educational content company really are ensuring accuracy in your work.
We have been fact-checking every script for several years now. I can't even tell you how long, but I do remember kind of being annoyed at the beginning. I was like, we haven't been fact-checking scripts all this time. Now we're having to spend money on this. I'm looking at the numbers, wondering why we suddenly have to invest in this. But now that's our superpower. I mean, people are going to be tired, if they aren't already, they're going to be tired of not knowing what's true and who they can trust. And we want to be able to be that resource that they know is fact-checked, and we bring in subject matter experts and we interview scientists, and we have, a really incredible, talented, diverse team with incredible professional backgrounds. So hopefully we are seen as the gold standard.
I think my concern is more, does it even really matter anymore?
Our hope is that we can look at what happened with yellow journalism. And I hesitate to use this example because you two probably know more about it than I do, but that did not end up being what journalism was for forever. The kind of attention grabby, high mass type of journalism that kind of tore society apart for a little bit there. And then people got sick of it. And I do think people are going to get sick of being inundated with so much media that they don't know which way is up, and that they're going to start kind of anchoring to someone they trust. And our hope and what we're banking on is that eventually people will get tired of feeling lied to and manipulated and really seek out the trustworthy sources like Complexly.
I hope people want to seek out
Me too.
trustworthy sources. You would hope. What we've also seen is just this huge kind of news cycle around protecting kids and teens online. I mean, we've seen countries move to ban social media use, starting with Australia. Meta and YouTube were just found liable for, knowingly designing their products to be addicting. You do have educational content for kids and you're on YouTube. What do you kind of make of this moment and what does it mean for your business as well?
Kids content is really hard, and it has been for a long time. I am really proud of Crash Course Kids and SciShow Kids. Those are our two kids' IPs. My kids are 4 and 6, and they love SciShow Kids. And we have actually pulled back on investing in that area with our own cash. We really, we're happy to make it if someone wants to come along and help fund it. But there's really a challenging business model there if you're not the Blueies and the Coco Melons who can go then, sell plushies at Target and everything. So I do think that there's a pretty challenging model out there for kids content, and we're not going to be pushing in that area. It's also a very fraught time for, kids' audiences on these platforms. And we think that there's good reason for that. It is a very tricky subject. And we sympathize with all the people who are claiming that these platforms have not been designed in the best interests of kids. So yeah, we're just kind of pulling back from there right now and making sure that our content is available to those families, but also making sure that it's available on other destinations like third-party licensors or kids content apps.
Thank you so much for joining us, Julie. We so appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie.